Hello, welcome in or welcome back to my channel. My name is Deb from Daijah Reads, and it is time to kick off one of the vlogs that I've been absolutely dying to get started with. In January of every year, or the end of December, I suppose it starts, everyone starts putting out their favorite reads of 2025. And I love going through those videos to see what we have in common and what I need to move up my TBR. And this year, I've been going through so many videos, collecting so many books that I really want to get to. I'm not even sure what my TBR is for this particular video, where I am picking some of those books and reading them with you and giving you my thoughts. Last year when I did this video, I found a few new favorites for myself that made it onto my favorite reads of 2025 video. So I'm hoping that this will prove the same this year. It's always a little bit hard because there are some people I watch their video and I'm totally in agreement with every book, and then I realize I get to the end of the video and I've read everything. Or there's some that maybe I just don't have access to in the moment. So I won't possibly get to all the things I want to in this video and all of my favorite booktubers in this video, but I'm hoping to get some good variety in. I am starting off with one that I am super hyped for. Brie at 4 Paws in a Book started singing the praises of a book she was finishing at the very end of 2025, and from everything she said about it, it was one I absolutely wanted to read, and I was really hoping that it might make it onto her top reads video, and it did, and that is Obsidian Sky by Jill Astor. This is an advanced copy. This one comes out on February 2nd, and I have a gifted copy from the author, so thank you so much to Jill Astor for that, because this is the one I was dying to get into, and I'm happy to say it's going well. I'm about 33% of the way through it. It's a relatively chunky read. It is only available for me currently on Kindle, so I am having to read it with my eyes, and unfortunately I have to do things like go to work during the day, things like that don't allow for eyeball reading, but I am flying through this when I sit down to read it and having a great time. We are following two characters in here, Phelan and Thorn, and as the book opens, we witness this dragon bonding event, and it was just gripping and powerful. And the author has a great way of describing things and really putting you in the moment. I would call the writing style very descriptive. I think it's done in a really masterful way to really grab the attention, and that just threw me into this book. And I was just sat with this book for quite a while after that. Phelan is a first-year cadet. She's going through the deadly trials associated with this Asgard training academy, and the hope is that everyone will get to develop a power, whether it be earth, air, fire, or water. And things go a little bit differently for her. It's in the synopsis, it says that her powers develop in a different way, and people are very surprised by this. She doesn't know what's going on. She's kind of out of control with this. Thorn is a son in the kind of ruling line. He is called Prince Thorn in the synopsis, but he's also kind of a couple years ahead of Phelan, and the link that forms between them is a bit of a rivalry. There's banter, there's interesting dynamics happening between them, and with the things that unfold without going into too much detail, really the relationship is working for me. We aren't having kind of insta anything. They're having to work to train together, to learn to deal with each other, and I think that's going really well for me also. So I'm really excited to keep going with this one. I'm super excited for this vlog. It's off to an amazing start, and I will check back in with you when I have more thoughts. I am back because I have finished my first book for this vlog, and Brie did not steer me wrong. Obsidian Sky was just a lot of fun. I think this one is going to hit kind of the fourth wing itch as we're waiting for new books in that series. It has kind of similar vibes, but it goes a different route, and I liked that. I also think the writing was good. I like a good descriptive writing that doesn't overdo it, and I think this one hit the right mark for me. I think I could see where some people might find it too descriptive, and there were little nitpicky things that I didn't necessarily love. I would say there's a couple instances where I felt like a couple of phrases were a little repetitive here or there, but I think the writing was done in such a great way that it built tension so well. I still have that opening sequence that I talked to you about firmly in my brain as a hook to this book that really brought the kind of idea, the power of the dragons, the power of the bond between humans and dragons, and how that worked. The moments of tension continue throughout the book pretty regularly. We get these moments of buildup of something dark coming, and it gets dark at the end. And My furry dragon was trying to climb up my side, so I guess we get a little Kylie in here too. But the darkness builds and we get a really epic kind of conclusion to this book in the sense of epic battles and there being consequences and all of that. You want to get back down? No, you're chilling? Okay. There are prophecies going on in here. There are kind of stakes for the entire world and what happens there. And I think that was really well built out. The side characters I enjoyed. There's a little bit of a friend group. We didn't maybe see them quite as much as I would have liked, but I think there was so much going on in this book, quite honestly, that the plot took center stage. And I do really appreciate a book that really has a lot of intricacies to the plot. And the romance is definitely there. It's very much entrenched in the story, in the prophecies, in everything going on in the book, but it doesn't overtake the plot. And I really, really appreciate when an author can pull that off because it's not always easy. Sometimes you just cut over to all romance all the time for a while and you lose the story. And I think it was balanced out really well in here. In the end, if you can't tell, I really, really, really enjoyed this book. I think it's getting a very high 4.5 from me and rounding for sure to a 5. I think this is definitely a fantastic debut. I will be eagerly awaiting the next book in the series. But for now, I have finished my first book. I'm excited. It did take me a while to read. I will be honest with that. There is no audiobook currently for this one. Obviously, the book's not even out yet. Oh, I know. Stay there. And now we've been abandoned. But the fact that I was reading this with my morning coffee and unfortunately had to leave for work each day and was reading it at bedtime and unfortunately fell asleep, which was not the book's fault. That was entirely me a lot. It did take me a while to get through, but every time I picked it up, it was really easy to just get perfectly sucked back into the world and keep going. So with that, I'm on to figure out what I'm going to be reading next, and I'll provide you with an update when I have one. Hello, I am back. I am picking up, or actually I have picked up my next read from a Booktuber favorite video, and this time I am paying attention to the favorites from Leandra at Leandra the TBR0. She had quite a few that I was intrigued by, and then I saw one that I knew I had to pick because I've heard her talk about it a couple times, and both times I said I need to add that to my TBR, and now apparently is finally the time. I was really happy to see this on her list because it's one that I wasn't sure if she had read it this year or last year. I remember hearing about it mostly when she was reading the sequel and enjoying that as well. It is a duology, so I'm starting another series, but that's okay. You're hearing some chaos potentially from the puppy because I just got home from work and of course turned on the camera, and of course that means she went from laying and chilling to being Chaos Queen. But the book in question from Leandra is Infinity Gate by M.R. Carey. This is a duology. It is a multiverse story. It is sci-fi. Hearing her talk about it, it has a lot of heart. It has a lot of moving pieces, and it really just had me intrigued. It sounded like the type of book that I could really enjoy. Something about it kind of called to me as if it had some similarities maybe to Becky Chambers in the kind of diversity of characters and the interesting sci-fi elements. It also sounded like it would get into the science, but also not feel overwhelming in the science, if that makes sense. And I am now halfway through this, or nearly. I'm at like 45% or so, and I am actually having a great time. I am struggling with trying to figure out how to say why I'm loving it so far. That sounds bad to say, but it's not. It's not meant to be bad anyway, because it's in some ways a little slice of lifey, which doesn't always work for me. But I think the science of it and the communication between the characters about what a multiverse is and the theories behind this are all really interesting. The book opens with chapter 0, and we are hearing from kind of like a artificial intelligence character that was born during the conflict between the Pandemonium, which is an empire, which we don't know much about at the very start, and a machine network, it sounds like. As of right now, we're mostly at the halfway point learning about the Pandemonium Empire, which is a basically mass conglomerate of alternate realities that are banded together. And they're very much colonial. They're very much the humanity side of things, even as much as they're not made up of all realities where we would consider the dominant species to be human. I'm phrasing this very, very poorly. The book starts, we're following a woman and she is on Earth, our Earth, a different Earth, we don't really know, but an Earth that looks like ours. And she is a scientist and she is working with an AI that one of her colleagues brought into being. And she's basically the only one left at this campus at this research university, and this is because the world is dying. And our scientist kind of stumbles into discovering the multiverse and discovering travel between different iterations of this multiverse. And she sees this as a way to save the world. The world can't fight over resources if there are tons and tons of planets out there, not all of which are even inhabited because humans didn't evolve on all planets, all iterations of the world. And that means there's tons of resources out there that aren't even being used. People can't starve to death because there's realities where food is still abundant. And she's figuring out, with the help of this AI, how to map out the different universes, how to travel between them. And that's the first chunk of the book. We then are following a young man who has learned that he can make a living for himself, basically acting as a sex worker. And he runs into her and is introduced to the multiverse that way. And then we start expanding further out and seeing other realities and so forth. We've seen the machines referenced in the opening chapter a little bit. It's been talked about what has happened to them on different planets. I keep saying planets. It's different. It's the same planet. It's just different worlds. Planets called different things in different places, but it is basically the same place. We've definitely had some really interesting discussions about humanity and the different ways evolution may have gone differently on different paths that the world could have taken, different capabilities that different species and iterations would have had, how some worlds are going to be very similar to ours, some are going to be very different to ours. There's also this entity, this conglomerate, that is basically putting themselves in charge of all travel between instances, and they have very particular views of, if it's not part of our conglomerate, if it's not part of our empire, they don't really count. Go in, kill them, wipe them out, doesn't really matter. So I think we can see some parallels with our world. I don't know. I'm having a good time with it and can't really put my finger on explaining why. I think it's very approachable. It does go into the science and the theory and all of that, but not too heavily, not in a way that I'm losing track of what they're talking about. Everything they're talking about sounds logical and makes sense. Obviously, I don't think this is exactly the science that we would use to travel between different universes or anything, but the way it's presented in here, it makes sense. The kind of talk about fractals and how many changes there would be over the course of the entire history of the planet and how many iterations that would mean are out there if every time a different decision is made, you branch off into a different kind of universe. So anyway, having really good time with this one. I am planning this evening to make some dinner, chill out a little bit, do some crochet. This has been great on audio, and I am probably going to go ahead and continue consuming this. I would love to finish this up tonight and get some good crocheting done while I'm doing that. I don't know, I didn't sleep super well last night, so I'm not committing to being done with this by the morning, but I'm gonna try to make a good solid dent in what I have left of it. Took me a little bit longer to get back to you than I expected, but that's okay. I needed just a day off of everything, life, work, everything yesterday. So pretty much spent a day in bed, just exhausted for no particular reason. But I am back because I have a couple updates for you. First off, I did indeed finish up Infinity Gate, and I had a great time with this. I didn't feel 100% the 5-star feelings that I think Leandra did with it, but I definitely am fascinated by this concept, by this world, by what it has to say. There's certainly messages that apply to our current world today, but it's done in a very integrated into the story type of way, not like you feel like you're reading a message heavy book. I think the different iterations of the universes and how changes the author predicts could have happened, and the way different entities become in charge, and the kind of tie-in of what machine versus, I want to say humans, but that's not right because not all of these are humans. Machines versus living organisms, I guess, maybe is a way to make a distinction, but I think it is making the point in here, in this particular case, that machines have their own set of feelings and biases and so forth going on with them as well. And I had a couple of twists and turns I kind of saw coming, but they went a different direction than I thought, so I appreciated that. And I think this one was just really engaging, definitely kept me hooked, and giving it a very strong 4, verging on 4.5 stars, and am definitely wanting to pick up book 2. It leaves off feeling like some things are concluded, but also very much with things open that you want to continue on with in book 2. So that is the plan, and I'm not going to be able to pick it up in the immediate present, but hopefully pretty soon. And with that one done, I had to come up with what I was going to do next, and that's always the hardest part of these videos because there's so many I want to get to, and honestly I might do a part 2 in February-ish, maybe. We'll see, because I'm definitely not going to get to everything I would love to this month, and before I need to get a vlog out and so forth. But one that I knew I definitely was going to have on this list, I was sure it was going to make it onto the top books of the year year from someone that I really wanted to include, and that is Becca at BeccaandTheBooks. This is a book she's talked about a couple times. It made it into her top romantasy for the year, and I was just waiting and waiting for her top books of the year to come out. And indeed, it was in that video. And I also saw it on several other lists of people that I know and trust, so this one was a definite must read, and that is The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. This is, of course, the same author who wrote One Dark Window and its sequel, which I really enjoyed. The atmosphere in that one, the writing in that one, and this book definitely is one that I immediately wanted. I have the really pretty Fairy Loot edition. I think they did a stunning job with it. A naked hardcover as well. And honestly, I didn't know too much going into it. I didn't want to hear people talk about it too much before I went in, but I knew we were following a diviner and a knight. The diviner is known as Six. She and her fellow diviners are all assigned numbers, not names. She does remember her name from before. She's tried to hold on to kind of her past identity, even though she doesn't really remember much before she came to the woman in charge of the diviners. The way the diviners work is somebody comes to ask a question, and as the book opens, the first person coming is the new king, and they give the diviner a bit of her blood, and they give the diviner a bit of their blood. She is drowned by the abbess, and in this drowning process, she has visions that have to do with omens, importance, and signs, and whether they're good or bad. And she's really good at her job. She's really close with her fellow diviners, and this is the life she knows. She doesn't really know to want or think of anything else. In the process of the king coming, she meets this knight Rory, and they don't get on very well at the start. She sees him, he seems to despise her for some unknown reason, but then things take a turn for her, and her sisters, her fellow diviners, start disappearing one by one as they're sleeping in their room, and she is not willing to just accept this as what's happening. And Rory winds up, through the course of events, stepping in and assisting her in getting out so she can go out and find her sisters and find answers. All along this, we also have a very fun character in the gargoyle who kind of has attached himself to her, and he is just quite the character. He's very emotional, he's very loud, he's very protective. He is just such a fun addition into what is a kind of dark atmospheric book. He kind of plays a counterpart to that, and I'm having so much fun with it. I think it's definitely itching that need where I love an atmospheric read. It definitely has those kind of gothic vibes going on in here for me, and I'm really intrigued by the different answers we're going to start getting, I think, about divination and about what is going on in this world. Obviously, we have a very naive main character in Six, and she is kind of someone who's been going with the flow and hasn't really asked a ton of questions in a successful way anyway. She's had questions in her mind, but she hasn't really had an opportunity to get answers, and I really like that we're getting to follow her along and kind of branch out. And there's little things in the story like the fact that she is covered in a shroud that she's lived her entire life under. Even her fellow diviners haven't seen her body, her eyes, her anything. And as the story goes on, we're starting to see elements of that kind of lighten, that expectation that she's always going to be covered by this shroud begin to fade away. And I think the author's doing some really interesting things like that. So I'm eager to continue on with this. This will be the next one I will be finishing up, and I will let you know my final thoughts when I get there. I am back. I have a couple updates for you. First off, I finished up The Night and the Moth, and this I had a great time with. I had a few places where I felt like it got a little bit slow, but I really loved the kind of atmosphere of this one, the slow reveals we start getting about things that we saw in our diviner's original kind of divination, would you call it that? I suppose. Her visions and the different elements that are part of these visions that we get to see through her eyes and how they have positive and negative implications, the powers surrounding the objects that are part of that vision, the different powers that be that hold these objects, and we keep seeing this over time. And we get to know our character more and more, and she kind of has moments of self-discovery throughout the book that I really liked. And overall, this was a really, really solid 4-star for me. I had a great time with this one. It's definitely one I think that will stick in my mind pretty well. I really enjoy Rachel Gillig's writing, and this is no different in that regard. And I am very eager to read more from her going forward as well, and more in this world. It does feel like it came to a conclusion with the kind of plot of this book. I was kind of getting to the point where I was like, was this standalone? Am I mistaken that it's a series? And it just didn't feel like there was a lot that was going to wind up being open-ended. And the way this book kind of worked is it wrapped most things up, and then toward the end of it, it opened new things. So you have things to look forward to in a future installment, how things are going to resolve, how things are going to go. But it did finalize a lot of kind of the questy, actiony stuff that we were up to in this particular book. We get answers, we get new questions, and I think that it did really well at kind of balancing out feeling like a completed book, but also leaving me really eager to get a new book. And then after two kind of romantasy-ish books, although both very, very different, I decided I wanted to go a little bit of a different direction. And in going through Cassidy at Covers with Cassidy's top books of the year, she had several on her list that I haven't gotten to yet that I do want to get to, and several that we have overlap on. But one that kind of stood out for me just because it didn't initially look like a Cassidy book in my head, and maybe or maybe not a Deb book either, but one that's been on my radar that I've been kind of keeping an eye on and been interested in was The Thrashers by Julie Soto. This is an author who I know writes romantasy and romance, I believe both. And this one, however, is more of a mystery thriller, and it's a YA story. One of the characters in here is Zach Thrasher, and his name becomes the name of the group of friends, the clique, if you would call it that, I think. That is like the popular kids, the ones that everyone kind of wants to get close to, but they also have a lot of power when it comes to like erasing people or cutting people out. We are primarily following Jody, who is an old friend of Zach. That's how she kind of becomes part of this group, but she's not necessarily the best fit with the popular crowd, and she knows it. She knows she's not exactly their kind. She's kind of worried about being erased out of the group a little bit, but the story really starts with Emily. Emily was someone who really wanted to be part of the in crowd, and the book opens with her perspective. We are following her, and she says, "The night I died was supposed to be my prom night." While the kids of her high school are off having fun at prom, she is at home committing suicide. And this obviously has a lot of impacts. There are a lot of people who blame the popular crowd for bullying her, for not letting her in. There's questions about mental health, obviously, and her family knows and likes Jody. And so Jody kind of has maybe some insight into the family or access to the family. The kind of ongoing impact of Emily and her life and her death impacts this friend group, but also the police are kind of looking into it. Was this actually the result of bullying? Was there something more sinister happening? The friends, they are in high school. They are used to spending like all their free time together, but they're kind of separated, but not really because they're not very good at listening. They have to worry about things like what's going to happen to their futures. They're preparing to go off to college. They're preparing to pay for college. And there are a lot of dark subjects in here. Obviously suicide. There's also domestic violence between parents and children. There's substance abuse. There is obviously bullying, and there's just a lot going on with this. And I'm really eager to see where it goes. I like Jody. I like the fact that she's feeling, as much as she is, being torn between different loyalties. Like is probably the wrong word, but I think it's being well done. The idea that she has so much sympathy for Emily where maybe these other kids in this group don't. And she has reliances on these other people to kind of get her out from her own home situation, but they're not always the most reliable either. We've got Zach, who everyone's in love with and everyone is focused on as the center of the group. I mean, the Thrashers has his last name attached to it, aside from the fact that they're thrashing people who they feel are less than them. And so far, I'm having a good time with this one. I think it is the right level of engaging, but also an easy read. And I'm looking forward to hopefully digging into this and finishing this out today. That's the plan. So I'm going to get back to this. I just picked up a copy from the library. I have the audiobook as well while I was waiting for this to come in. And that is the plan for the rest of my day. Okay, my friends, I finally finished another book. I feel like I've been going very slowly through this, and honestly, I am definitely behind on my January plans, so I'm not going to get to as many books as I had hoped to in this video. But with that, I did want to provide you with an update because I did finish up The Thrashers by Julie Soto. This one was a good time. It was exactly what I needed. It was an easier read than some of the other ones I've been getting up to lately, just in terms of being able to super easily consume it, absorb it, do a little bit of multitasking to it, but also be really entertained by it. I think it did the the various characters well and the relationships between them, and kind of that old nostalgic feel of high school and crushes and who likes who back. There's some of that going on in here. There is a romance in here, and I didn't 100% get fully on board with it with some of the other things the characters were up to, but I did like the supportive nature of it, and overall I like the direction the story took with the characters and how they processed what was going on, and kind of a brighter future possibly to come, maybe. I think the author did a really good job of peppering things in of what was just school shenanigans. That's the wrong word, because there were some serious outcomes in here. There were twists that I didn't expect, but also a really nice line of, is there something paranormal happening in here? Is there a revenge plot going on? Because from the very beginning we got hints, like when this girl was around, lights flickered, and then after she's gone we see lights flickering and things like that. So I think that the characters being freaked out by these things got the reader, myself, involved in it as well. And it wasn't a 5-star new favorite, but it was a very solid 4-star read. I had a fantastic time with it, and I'm glad that Cassidy had me picking this one up. So like I mentioned, I'm feeling very behind on this. I'm hoping to get a couple more books in, probably just 2, maybe just 1, but we'll see how that goes, and I'll check in with you once I've started something else. I'm back because I've picked up another Booktube favorite. This one I pulled from Daijah at Daijah's Book World. It's one that's been on my list that I've heard a few mixed things about, but it is on my horror bingo card. It is one that sounded really intriguing to me, even though I didn't love the author's first book. So the book in question is Crafting for Sinners. I have been living in my crochet era, although ironically, as I've been reading this one, I have lost motivation this week on crocheting, but that's okay. We'll get back to it. But this one is set in a craft store, and it is a horror, which is one of my favorite genres. So those two things combined, very excellent. So I am actually having a good time with this one so far. This is following Ruth, and she lives in a very, very religious, very conservative town. She and her girlfriend have to hide the fact that they are more than just roommates. They keep their blinds closed all the time. They don't show affection in public. All of these types of things, because this is a town ruled by a very, very strict religious code, and obviously being queer is wrong. So she worked at this hobby store, and think of it like a very, very over-the-top Hobby Lobby is kind of the gist I think we're meant to get out of it. But she was working there. She was let go from there. She is struggling financially. She has diabetes. She needs very, very expensive insulin, and she is having a hard time making ends meet. She's trying to sell knitting projects and can't even really afford the yarn for this. So she's kind of paying her company back by taking some. And one of the days she goes in, she gets caught, and she's thinking, oh no, I'm going to jail. No, it's much, much worse than that. They've closed off the doors, they've barricaded them, they've done everything, and she's in trouble. And this very quickly escalates. This very quickly gets gory. It's messy. She's fighting back. She's fighting her own body too, because her diabetes is not under control when she's in this stressful situation, and no food, no access to insulin, no anything. And she doesn't know what these people are up to, but it's bad news for her. So this is very over the top. If you can't handle gore and body horror, this is not a book I would recommend, but it's definitely keeping me engaged. It's definitely keeping me hooked. And I think the cover is amazing with the crocheted hands on there. I don't know if it's going to focus right. I can't see. I don't have my glasses on, but I think this one is a good time so far. I don't know at this point if I'm predicting a 5-star read out of it, but I am having a good time, and it's definitely disturbing me and giving me cringe moments and chills moments. So I'm eager to continue on. I flew past the halfway point. I'm at like page 190 out of 300-ish. So I should be able to finish this one up really quickly and get back to you with final thoughts. I'm back with final thoughts on Crafting for Sinners, and overall I found this an entertaining read. I'm glad I picked it up, and it was a little something different. It definitely hit some different horror notes than the stuff I've been reading recently. It was gory, it was creepy. You finally kind of get past the initial setup of it. It does take a while with the idea of her being chased through the store for quite a while. Someone mentioned to me that they felt like that went on for a while, and I agree. Still, I think, especially since I did pick up the audio for for this one. I think that was just really a good kind of gripping thing to be reading during my commute when I was stuck in traffic, when I was really getting to focus on the book. And there were some creative ways that the author worked with the setting, with the crafting store, with what's available in a crafting store, and how that plays out for the characters, for the people who are after her, and her having to fight back. I did also really appreciate the diabetes representation in here. The blood sugar issues she's having felt realistic in the moment, and also just kind of the commentary on how expensive healthcare is when you don't have insurance, and even when you do have insurance in our country, quite frankly. There were twists and turns that I didn't expect, and I appreciated that. It went directions I didn't expect, which I appreciated, but didn't give kind of that absolutely obsessed, couldn't put down feeling that I really wanted out of it, as I thought maybe it might at the very outset. But in the end, this one's still getting 4 stars for me. I had a good time with it. I had not really appreciated the author's previous book, so I'm really glad that I connected better with this one, and now this is an author I need to try again, see if this is a one hit or if there are going to be more that are right up my alley. But for now, I'll go ahead and leave you here and be back with, I think, one more book. And I'm back because I've started our final book for this particular vlog. There are more books I would love to get to, but I am running out of time and probably pushing things, fitting in one extra book, but that's okay because it's from Books with Lexie, and I get a lot of great recs from her. I love a good horror, I love a good thriller, and she's probably the channel I watch the most that gives those types of recs out, and of course I had to fit one in. And one of the books I saw her mention is one that's a slightly bit older, and that is The Lake of Lost Girls by Kathleen Green. This is one that has been calling to me from my TBR for quite a while. I have a gifted audiobook copy from Dreamscape Media and Libro FM. I've had it since it came out at the end of 2024, so I'm very, very overdue on reading this book. So I was glad to have an extra excuse, extra motivation to move it up my priority list. This one, we are following 2 sisters in 2 different timelines. In 1998, we have Jessica, who is going off to college, kind of forging her own path, and not everything goes smoothly. There are girls who are going missing from this setting, and we don't yet know, as far as I am now, which is about 40% into the book, what exactly is going to happen to Jessica. But from the present time, we know something happens to her as well. In the present, we are following Jessica's younger sister, Lindsay, and it has been 25 years since Jessica disappeared. They don't have answers. Her body was never found, and there is now this podcast that is coming up that is looking into all of these disappearances. It's quickly apparent that the police did a bad job, and they didn't connect the fact that all of these disappearances were probably connected, and maybe that would help the investigation. They basically closed it down as a cold case, but things are starting to happen with this podcast. Evidence is coming to light, and suddenly there's new life in this investigation. Lindsay herself has lived in the shadow of this disappearance for the last 25 years. She is the one her family really has leaned on a whole lot. She's always known she can't really go away to school. She can't really leave her family for long, and she'll kind of come back to them and support them and so forth. So she's really invested in finding answers and begins looking into things as well. And the kind of dual timeline in here is working well for me. I think the author's doing well at establishing the 2 timelines. It took me a little bit, since I'm only on audio, to kind of pick up who was who and what the timelines were, but that didn't take long, and once I settled into it, it's been going great. There's a podcast element to the book, and we get pieces of this podcast. And where the previous book I read, Crafting for Sinners, you didn't know initially how the podcast was going to tie in. This one, it opens, it's very clearly about this story and about what these sisters and these other women went through. So I am looking forward to continuing on with this one. It definitely has me hooked. Lexie did warn going into this one it was going to be slower paced, and I do agree with that, but she also said that regardless, it kept her engaged, and I also agree with that. So I'm going to keep going, and we'll get back to you with final thoughts. I am back with my final update. I did indeed finish up The Lake of Lost Girls, and I really enjoyed this one. I agree with what Lexie said about the family and the interest in getting all the reveals and secrets and discoveries. The interactions between the family members were very key as well. I think the relationships that each of our main characters had with their parents and with how they felt about their parents, how their parents were interacting with them, was very interesting, and especially seeing the change between the 2 daughters with such such a huge age gap with such a tragedy in their history together, I think was really well done. The podcast element in this one, I completely forgot to even talk about the podcast element in Crafting for Sinners because it felt a little bit more like an add-on. It wasn't feeling very integral to the story, even though looking back, it did eventually tie in. I just kind of kept forgetting it was there until it came back again. In this one, the podcast element is really interesting. There are discussions about the podcast and how it impacts the survivors, the family members left behind after somebody goes missing, and the dredging up of old secrets and looking into things. But at the same time, the podcast is actually helping deliver the story to us. It's helping to bring interest back to a cold case that needs answers. And I think that was well done. Also, kind of the way things wrap up, it does say a little bit of something without getting into spoilers about true crime podcasts and the information it delivers to us. I think the way this ended definitely had some bittersweet moments to it. It had some surprises to it. And I did like the way that this wrapped up. This winds up being a very strong high for verging on 4.5, I think, for this one to round out this particular vlog. I am reminded when I do these things and I pick up a friend's favorite book, how much I have a good time and how much I enjoy the process. And obviously this is something I need to do more. I need to trust the booktubers that I watch and the books they're telling me to pick up, and I'll have a better time if I do that. Let me know in the comments, have you picked up any new favorites based on recommendations, based on either end of the year recommendations or recommendations in general? Let me know all of the things. And if you made it this far and you don't have anything to comment, leave me some sort of crafty emoji, yarn, thread, I don't know what's all out there, but Crafting for Sinners definitely had the very impactful craft store setting, and that's what's coming to mind. If you could hit that like button below, I would surely appreciate it, and subscribe if you're interested in more of my themed reading vlogs, more of my book reviews, and more of my bookish content in general. But for now, I'll leave you here and see you real soon in a new video.